Everyone experiences episodes of doubt, but too often we don't pay enough attention to what our doubts might be telling us. While self doubt can serve as a hedge against mistakes, far too often it inhibits us from swinging for the fences. Let's have ourselves a pocket sized pep talk because while it's perfectly reasonable to question the merits a big decision facing you might have, that questioning turns to self sabotage if your doubts emanate from a place of fear, anxiety, or procrastination. How do you know if doubt is a friend or a foe? Well, you stay tuned because we're going to talk with an expert on doubt.
A Pocket Sized Pep Talk, the podcast that can help energize your business and your life with a quick, inspiring message. Now, here's your host, Rob Jolles.
Today's guest, Amy Bernstein, is a certified nonfiction book coach helping subject matter experts and thought leaders to develop sellable nonfiction books in a range of fields. She's also a published novelist, a former award-winning journalist, and spent nearly a dozen years working in the George W. Bush and Obama administrations in Washington, D.C. Her new nonfiction book is Wrangling the Doubt Monster, Fighting Fears, Finding Inspiration. Happy to have you with us and welcome to the show, Amy.
Thank you, Rob. I'm really happy to be here with you.
It's a pleasure to have you here. So I want to dive right in. And with you, I want to jump back to your belief that we need to identify the root causes of our doubts that are holding us back. And you're right, it's often not what we think. So what are some of the root causes of doubt that we're not thinking about here?
Doubt is really a mindset, right? So it can inform our sense of reality. And when it informs our sense of reality, that means it's also going to inform the ways that we respond to any given situation. So self-doubt is really great at masking what we might really be feeling about something and how we respond to it. So we can be responding either from a place of positivity or a place of negativity, but it's definitely not a neutral state of being. It's very much a heightened state. So it comes at us and it's within us and operating on many different levels. It's a very tricky kind of a beast. And that may not really be an answer to your question, but we can dig into that some more. But we need to sort of look at what this really is. And it is a mindset and a very slippery one.
Well, and it absolutely is. And, and I'm probably one of the most confident people you'll meet. And yet I'm one shot away. I mean, I was a basketball player. It was great when the first three shots went in. And when they didn't, I was a good rebounder and assist man. Doubt creeps in. And even with grizzled vets and people that are, accomplished at what they're doing. So, yeah, I guess that's what I'm trying to track right now. I don't think any of us are protected against it, but are there, I guess, some tricks, something that we can do for not if, but when self-doubt begins to kind of creep in?
Yes, there are a lot of different things that we can do, and this all goes back to the context of both the moment and beyond, the context of what's happening beyond the moment. So doubt is going to operate either as a friend or as a foe. And it's really important to figure out what it's doing for you or how it's working against you. And that is so context dependent. And I can give you a really specific example that comes out of the workplace, in fact. I was working for a nonprofit organization that had a lot of fiduciary responsibility. And the CEO, the organization was not doing a great job of defining its mission and communicating its outcomes to the public. And the CEO, for a long period of time, just didn't seem able to commit to the strategies and putting out the documents and so forth that were going to address this sort of information gap. And it took me many months to understand. He resigned his position because he was doubting his own efficacy. He was doubting whether he was the right person to be the face of this organization. And he had other reasons that were all coming from strong places of self-doubt within him, not all of which I was privy to. But what I was privy to was the way self-doubt operated in him that held him back from making decisions that seemed to me simple and straightforward, But no decision is simple or straightforward if you are deeply doubting the context around the decision. So that's an example where this is sort of submerged and kind of hidden. And I don't think he would ever put this way to himself, but it is a way to really think about how it acts upon us in ways we haven't even put the words to.
Yeah, which makes sense. But then I guess I'm following your script a little bit. I've always tried to push back against self-doubt. It's an unwelcome foe in my brain. And yet you think that sometimes doubt or self-doubt uh, are positive actions. Can you
Absolutely.
talk me through that?
Yes. Yes. Self-doubt can keep us from making a really big mistake. One of the classic examples, which is slightly exaggerated, but only slightly, is imagine a surgeon is about to operate on someone's leg, and maybe he's not sure whether the correct leg has, let's say, been marked properly, or maybe it hasn't been marked. He will pause. The scalpel will not touch the skin because he or she, I should say, will pause and not make that incision until the surgeon is positive that they're making making the right move. Now that's, almost a life and death type of scenario. So it's exaggerated for effect. Doubt can be the inner break that we need to second guess something for all the right reasons. Do I have all the information I need? Am I really making the decision or stepping forward with a plan or an action that is the best one at this time based on everything I know? We can never be 1,000% sure, but by taking that pause, we can make sure that we're asking the right questions. And again, to pull an example, this time from my own work life, I was an executive speechwriter in Washington, D.C. It was a very pressure cooker environment, and I was writing a lot of speeches that were getting a lot of exposure in the media. So I couldn't afford to make a mistake. I couldn't afford to not do a lot of fact checking. So you could argue that maybe I went overboard. I over fact checked everything. I second guessed myself constantly. I was reaching out to other sources and making them double and triple check that they were giving me the right information that I could put into the speech. But that kind of really kind of like brutal cycle of second guessing and over checking and fact checking and duplicating and all of that kept me on my toes because I couldn't make a mistake and I had to really just double down on that because I was dogged by doubt every day. So doubt is not impeding my decisions. In fact, it's motivating me. So it is a very context dependent mindset, but we need to be aware of how it's operating in our lives.
Yeah, and that was a great example because you're right. We could cherry pick certain examples where clearly I don't want to have doubt in this situation, whereas other times I might want to. I interrupt this program for a little bit of a political question, but how do you handle, given the fact that you were so meticulous to make sure that your information was correct? That, and I'm not picking on one politician or another exactly, but there's so many things that are not fact checked these days. And when they are, we're getting a lot of information that isn't correct. When did we jump the shark on facts?
2016,
Yeah.
perhaps.
Okay.
But this is the conversation we're not going to have.
No, no,
But
no, no.
I will just say that for all of the stresses and frustrations that I had working in the federal government for a dozen years for two different federal agencies, looking back, it was a halcyon time. People believed in the rule of law. The policies that were being implemented had genuinely good intentions behind them. They were definitely do no harm kinds of policies, and uh, I was surrounded by people who knew what a fact was and believed in facts. So, you know, everything in life is context dependent, right?
Right.
So, if you're in an environment where talk about facts and things not being facts, if you're in an environment where you're constantly being gaslighted, which is to say people are asserting something to you is true when you know it not to be true, that is such a recipe for making your doubts flare up because if you hear it enough, you start to question reality and truth. And so we really are living in an age, I call it the age of doubt, because there is so much going on now in the questioning of factual information that it's only natural, it's only human to begin to question what you do know, and if what you do know is real and true, because we seem to all be redefining that day by day. So it's the age of doubt, and we really need to be aware of how we're managing our own sense of doubt and keeping it in context and keeping it in perspective.
Yeah, and that was a nice dance, and I appreciate that. It is a shame because I'm finding that in myself now on all my news sources. I have doubt, and as to not whether the story is true, but whether the story is overplayed. In other words, does this represent a
Mhm.
major situation, or are we cherry picking a very obscure example? And if I get mad at one side, I got to get mad at the other side too, and that creates doubt, which I never thought I would say out loud, but it creates doubt in the news sources that I'm depending on. I miss Walter Cronkite. I was a
Right?
kid, but I never doubted Walter
We
Cronkite.
never doubted Walter Cronkite, right? And the thing. I do think that there is a spiral effect here that is at work. It's way beyond the workplace. It's way beyond, the genesis for Wrangling the Doubt Monster originally was about people who are intensely creative and always doubting themselves. But this is way beyond that now. And the more I talk about it and think about it and, kind of live in the world that we're in, the more it's clear that we really create these spirals. I mean, we've all heard of this thing called a shame spiral, where you're ashamed and you often become more ashamed, and then you're ashamed of being ashamed, and then you just feel more rotten. And, you're in a shame spiral. I really think there is such a thing as a doubt spiral, where you just question and question. And while questioning is a healthy and necessary part of life and of, interrelationships, it also can be destructive and incredibly self-destructive. And it's very hard to move forward with confidence and optimism and clear projections for the future when you are surrounded by so much doubt and so much that brings doubt into our lives. It's a difficult place to be. It is the place where we are, and we do need to find ways to cope and manage that.
Yeah. Well, I think you've got your second edition now because I think you got to dive into the doubt spirals. If there are they, is that, do you talk about that in your book?
I don't, the book, I wrote the book, yeah, just a simpler, gentler time. It takes a couple of years for a book to come out,
Right.
and it's been out since January, and it was a long process. So no, I don't, although in conversations increasingly I do. And in essays that I've been writing for some various outlets, I'm trying to get at this because one of the things I've been exploring is how doubt, the way we doubt shifts as we age, which is also true. You know, young adults, Gen Z adults, and maybe the younger millennials are often filled with doubt about filling in the blanks of their own future, which is a certain kind of doubt. But by the time we're in our 50s, 60s, 70s, we doubt differently. We doubt our ability to do new things, to learn new things, to open up our world more than it is. We're sometimes afraid to try new things, and so doubt really changes over the course of a lifespan. And I'm kind of on a mission to have us acknowledge this mindset and how it shifts within us, and different things that we can do at different ages to address it.
I have to tell you, I'm really finding this fascinating. You are a subject matter expert on doubt. It's
Trying to
really
be
interesting to me. Um,
also a lifelong doubter, so that helps.
well, so kind of staying there, are certain people more prone to doubt? I mean, is it gender based, culture based, geographic based? Um, how does that, how do where our environment, how does that fit into
Yeah.
this?
I have been doing some new research into this area because there is still a gender component to the way doubt operates. For all the ways that the relationships between, I'm going to use male and female in the most traditional sense, but this crosses the genders the way that we all define them now. But to the extent that we have changed both our self-concept as male or female, and to the extent that we've changed our role in the workplace, in the family, and so forth, there are still a lot of forces at work that have not changed very much. Deborah Tannen wrote a book called In a Different Voice No, excuse me, that wasn't Deborah Tannen's book. That was Carol Gilligan's voice. Deborah Tannen wrote a book in 1982 called "You Just Don't Understand," and in that book, she talked a lot about the different ways that men and women talk to each other and talk to one another. And she helped to codify some of these ideas that women are rooted in networking and consensus building and relationship, and men are rooted more in kind of decision making and um, not prevaricating a lot and not really privileging the interpersonal nature of something so much as the task or the responsibility or the decision. And so we see the world differently. And even though there have been some shifts in this and much more fluidity than there were generations ago, I think it's still very real. And so women do self-doubt and articulate those self-doubts far more often and far more willingly than men. And they're more aware of feeling doubt than men can see in themselves or admit to themselves. Everyone has to forgive me for generalizing, but there's more than a nugget of truth in these generalizations. Last year, the Harvard Business School came out with a study that showed that a woman will tend not to apply for a job unless she feels she meets 100% of the credentials listed in the application. A man will apply for that same job if he thinks he meets six out of 10 of the credentials.
Wow.
This speaks loudly to me about a facet of self-doubt between the genders. The man is thinking, if we can read into this, I think I'm qualified. I'm going to apply. I'm probably competitive here. The woman is thinking, I really doubt that I could get this job, and then I'm competitive for this job unless I can match this job description 100%. So we really do think about these things differently, and we articulate them differently. Um, I met a man when I was reading from my book, and I looked at him and I was explaining a bit about the book, and he just looked at me and he said, "That's never been my problem." And I don't think that this man was, I'm not going to say that he was particularly arrogant or blind to his own faults, whatever they might be. I think it's just that men don't have the same interior conversations interrogating themselves about doubt that women do. And this is an age-old situation and difference between the genders that I think persists to this day, despite all the progress we've made.
Wow. Uh, it's really interesting because, I've always felt no matter, and like I said, I'm a very confident person, but I've read this somewhere and realized that we're all about 5 months away, meaning, you could have a wonderful job and a wonderful situation, lose that job, not tomorrow, but check with me in a few months. I work with a lot of people in career transition, and most of the people I work with are 50 and older, and I've been doing it for 15 years. And these are some of the most confident people in the world. But three straight no's in interviews, and they are shaken. That doubt monster begins to appear. So I really feel that and I'm speaking for the men, and I appreciate the generalization. By the way, we all know that we're just talking percentages. It's just a higher percentage, but I'm in that higher percentage, and yet I know as a salesperson, as an entrepreneur, when I get five straight yeses, you should see me when I show up for number six. I got my legs on the table practically.
Right.
I've got to not be so arrogant. Catch me when I've taken five straight no's in a row.
Mm-hmm.
That doubt creeps in. You'd think 32 years in business, it wouldn't happen. Five straight no's, maybe four.
It happens.
It
Right.
happens. It
So,
happens.
again, context, right? And
Right.
so it's always in us and it's activated in different ways in different situations. Perhaps you're in the same boat here, Rob, but I know so many people who have now lost their jobs in the federal government. We're talking serious professional jobs requiring tremendous expertise. And they have all been, as they say, riffed or, dozed or however you want to put it. And you want to talk about shaking confidence. For all these people, their context has been dramatically rattled. And even though it's not, no, no one brought this upon themselves, and you can tell yourself that over and again, this wasn't my fault, this was done to me, I didn't do this. It's really hard not to begin to then question aspects of your competence going forward. How do I cope? How well will I cope? What should I do first? Gosh, I don't know what to do. Gosh, is my resume up to date? Is this the best I can make it? So talk about doubt spirals. I think that there's so many people now who are just stepping into this, and it really goes to the core of how doubt operates in us. What do we do to manage that so that it is not the loudest voice in the room? In creative fields, self-doubt is often the loudest voice in the room, meaning your own head. Creative people doubt themselves constantly, all the time, intensely. They just aren't sure that they're good enough or talented enough. But this is a human trait. And so what we have to do is not let doubt always carry the day when it's the negative side and not the leg saving side.
Yeah.
Go back to the surgeon.
You know what I like also that you're doing? You keep using the word doubt. Okay, but go figure. We're talking about that. You have a book on doubt. I'm not saying we're overusing it. I'm saying sometimes I think words like doubt or imposter syndrome are words that we almost put our hands over our mouth and don't want to say out loud. And I think that gives it a little bit more power. I think the more we talk about it, those syndromes, this doubt exists in all of us. It's just not a matter of when and where, what's the circumstance. But I think our instinct is to want to not even look in that dark corner. And I think logic would state, if I'm catching you right, that maybe we should put a flashlight in that dark corner and not be afraid what's there. Let's just figure out how to manage it.
Exactly. And that goes back to what I even said. I agree with you completely at the top of the conversation, which is doubt really is a mindset that informs our sense of reality and
Yeah.
how we respond to that reality. And we do need to pay close attention because we may be responding from a place that's not in our best interest. And that can even be something like, let's go back to the creative person. You don't submit your novel anywhere because you're so doubtful that anyone is going to like it or want to publish it, and you'll be ridiculed. You feel so vulnerable that you can't take that step. What if you've written something incredibly brilliant and original? You are allowing your doubt to inform your decision making, and that's working against you. So we have to be sensitive to this. And I do think that these words have power, and I don't think we talk about them enough. And the reason is because this is about vulnerability.
Mm.
It's always about vulnerability. And that's not easy to talk about even in an overly self-confessional age. I mean, not all of us are going out there on TikTok and bearing our souls, right?
Right.
Um, and even the ones who are performing at it much of the time. And they're not talking about doubt, are they? So not really, not mostly.
Yeah. Well, so what would you tell someone who has just, I'm working with somebody right now who just got let go from a financial institution, a good guy, but 30 years or so. And, as this company is contracting and he's on the street right now, not living on the street, but out. What would you tell a person like this who's clearly going through doubt? And I know we're talking about a whole book here, but
Yeah,
sometimes in sales, people will say, well, you wrote 3 books on it, but what's the most important thing I need to know?
yeah.
And I can kind of shape that shot a little bit. But I'm going to give you an idea. In other words, I'm not really going to shift your mindset. What would be a thought or an idea that if that person were sitting in front of us right now or listening, that you tell them?
Where I would start is probably pretty in approaching therapy, and I'm not a therapist.
Hmm.
But I think it's really important to acknowledge that in that circumstance that you just described,
Hmm.
that feeling of doubt is very, very, very close to a feeling of shame, as in, I have failed. I may have been successful before, but that was then and this is now. And now I'm a failure. And so doubt springs from these feelings of shame and failure and not living up to the culture's expectations of us. And we can fall in our own minds, we fall fast and we fall far. Whereas really, this just all gets back to mindset. That person is as competent today as he was a week ago, a month ago, a year ago. So fundamental things about your self-conception, your ability, your core intelligence, your discernment, your ability to handle a difficult situation, the things that you have achieved in the past, the way you overcome difficult challenges. All of that is still very much part of who you are. But what starts happening is the doubt spiral, the shame spiral begins to sort of fill up your mind and your messages and telling you otherwise. So I think where this always begins is remembering that you are that competent person and to revel in your competence, which is something that I've been thinking a lot about, reveling in your competence, and that we cannot control so much of what happens outside of us,
Yeah.
but we can manage how we can revel in our own competence and project that and bring that to the outside world. So I think it's a recalibration and it's a reminding yourself that the world didn't actually hit the reset button on you, and you don't have to hit the reset button either. You didn't fail. You're still that competent person. You're just in a different context and a different circumstance. So I think some of this is really about sort of relational mindset that you have to really concentrate on.
Absolutely beautifully said. It's a question of instinct versus logic again, which I don't think I can go two shows without constantly bringing that up of how our instincts don't line up with logic frequently, and because the instinct right now for people who are losing their jobs, and you put the word shame to it. I've never really thought about it that way. The instinct is to retreat. It's to almost hide. They don't want to talk about it a lot. Certainly not with their friends or neighbors, and they're not going to be talking about it in the Safeway or CVS line. Whereas logic states that's exactly who they should be talking to. If we can get rid of the shame and realize that this is what companies do, and it's not personal.
Right.
If we can get rid of that, then logic states that we want to be talking to as many people as we can about this, because now we're extending our network, and soon we become that story that says, how'd you find that job? I mean, not to believe it. I was looking at a magazine at
Right.
the CVS, and one person, I started talking to a person. I told them about my situation. Their uncle's sister knew a friend, and
Right.
bang. But we
Bang. Right.
can't have that.
Hmm.
We feel the shame and we don't want to talk about it.
Hmm. Absolutely. And shame does make us silent, and we keep ourselves silent for all these reasons that you said, and I guess I said. And the reason we go, what reason shame is the go-to there so much in these situations is because our identities are so wrapped up in what the culture tells us success looks like. It looks like having a respectable job with a really good title and a good salary and some measure of power or autonomy. And that's what success looks like. And so artists have tremendous sense of self-doubt and sometimes shame because they don't meet those cultural guidelines. And when you lose your position in the work world, suddenly you look like you don't meet them either. Whereas, your situation is likely temporary, although I mean, long-term unemployment is nothing to sneer about, but and we're in a difficult time for all of that right now. But it's so hard to live the belief when you say it's not personal. Everybody can say it. It's very hard to internalize that, and that's because those doubt voices are so strong in you that of course, it feels personal. And so we have to sort of reset or reconfigure um, the balance in the messages that we're listening to. I call it changing the channel. You have to change the channel
Yeah.
and listen, dial in much more to positive things about yourself. And again, revel in your competence.
Right. And by the way, I'm married to an artist, so I certainly seen it from that angle. And a very successful artist who, and remember, I'm a business guy, so sorry to all artists who are listening, but one of the ways I measure success is, do your pieces sell? And her pieces sell all the time, and she does very well, and she's in galleries and things, and yet she's really subjected to doubt a great deal, and it just happened. So I've seen it on that level. But let me step into one other area, because I know I've got some salespeople that are listening, and They definitely don't want to talk about doubt, but it's there. This is the quiet one. It's tough when you're a salesperson to really confess to your doubt because no manager wants to hear that, and no teammate wants to hear it. So we suffer in silence a little bit in sales. I don't just write about it; I sell my programs. So a lot of times we're as good as our last sale. Any thoughts to a salesperson who is, and maybe you can correct me when I said they suffer in silence. How does a salesperson talk about their inability to sell when it can have some repercussions to them professionally? And I mean politically professionally in a sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sales, it's such a tough business when you're really selling yourself every time, not just the product or the service. So you're the one out there on the runway. You may as well be a model with clothes on walking down the runway because you're selling yourself. And how difficult is it to mask when you're feeling doubtful or you're feeling not at your competence? You're not reveling in your competence for whatever reason that day or whatever, right? Just an aside, my dad, early in his career, many, 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 many decades ago, worked for IBM in sales. That was his first serious job after college on the GI Bill. And my dad was definitely the kind of guy who was going to just bluster his way through it and make sure that he was right all the time because that's how he got through working in sales for IBM. Um, but I think that there's there's no clear way around this. There are times when we need to perform something we don't quite believe in order to believe in it in the moment. Um, and I think that can wake up in the morning and say, I just don't think I'm going to make quota this month, this week. I just don't think it's going to happen. You may be reflecting a reality, but that reality is coming back on you as doubt, which gets you into, a doubt and shame spiral, and which then it's hard for you to go out and do the thing and bluff your way through it. There's no easy answer here.
Yeah.
I think sales is a lot about performance. And I think it's a lot about what actors do, which is really in the moment, you so believe in what you're saying and doing in that moment that you've crowded the doubt out. It comes back roaring back later, but not in the moment.
Right.
Not in the room, not in the room with the prospect, not during the pitch, not during the Q&A around the pitch. Um, you just have to believe it in the moment. Yeah, I mean, salespeople are I think have a lot in common with actors in that they're able to put on a persona that meets necessary criteria in real time.
Yeah.
And then the mask can come off later. I do think it's important not to ignore it. Um, because just like my example with, over fact checking everything, it can also be an incredible motivator to prove your own doubts wrong, by exceeding quota that month. It's
Right.
like, yep, I do doubt, but I'm gonna revel in my competence this month, and I'm gonna show myself that I can really do it.
Well, that's a very half full approach there, and I'm a big believer in that acting piece. So much so that, and this is for a job seeker or a salesperson. So we've gotten five straight no's in interviews, or five straight no's from a client. That doesn't mean we can't take ourselves back to a moment where we did have five straight yeses. And
Exactly.
maybe that was a year or two ago, but can you close your eyes? Can you feel it? Can you see it? Can you taste it? Carol Burnett, I quote her every now and then on this show, once said, the body doesn't know when the mind is acting. If we can take ourselves back there, we begin to physically change. We can physically change. We stand up a little straighter. I'd rather that uh, getting into character and that thought process than dragging in five straight no's. I wonder what's going to happen today. Not that's not the mindset I want.
I totally agree with you, and I think that's exactly the right approach and a healthy approach. And I think too that a lot of this is just about acknowledging the reality instead of trying to bury it or ignore it. To say, I really do. I know this. Do say this in the book. I say this all the time. You cannot banish doubt, but you can manage it and you can walk with it. So go ahead and acknowledge that you have doubts that day about any number of things. You have doubts about your ability to close this sale. go ahead and acknowledge it. But it's not the last word. It's a component of how you're feeling. It's not all the components of how you're feeling. And so if you kind of talk back to it, I think that that's one technique for gaining control over mindset, because all of this is happening up in our little teeny tiny brains, right? So we just have to try and manage this as best we can internally.
Right before we started the podcast, I was talking to somebody who was struggling a little bit, and they mentioned the word that the old saying about butterflies. And perhaps you've heard it, and I probably won't get it exactly right, but you don't yell at yourself because you're feeling tension in your stomach. There's actually a physical reason for that. It's with blood, and I could go through that, but we won't need to. We call them butterflies. And
Right.
yet you'll hear some people say, we don't want to get rid of the butterflies. We just want to get them to fly in formation. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you, which is to make peace with our doubts. We can't scold ourselves for having them. We just have to figure out how to kind of get them into formation and keep them from, disrupting us.
I think that's a wonderful way to put it. And I have to admit that I haven't heard it about the butterflies put that way. And I absolutely love it. And it's all about putting it in perspective. It's all about this notion of changing the channel so that you can dial down the doubt voice, which will rule the roost if you let it. And it's very easy to let it, but change the channel so you go away from that dial and you dial up the things that remind you of your competence and all the ways that you've succeeded. Because we tend to not. I can't tell you how many people I talk to, and they are mostly women who, but not all, but mostly, who all they can hear is the doubt, and they're just ragingly talented and successful at so many things, and that's the teeniest, tiniest, quietest voice in them. And so we do have to, as you say, get the butterflies to fly in formation. We should be able to hear those other voices just as loudly, if not more loudly.
That's a great way to finish. Wrangling the doubt monster, fighting fears, finding inspiration, folks. If you got to find that book, and I want you to get it, and I want you to put some reviews on this book too. But I don't know anybody in business who doesn't have issues with doubt. Positive, negative, but that's not one we can ignore. Love the fact that we've got a book on it. I think it would enhance what we're doing, and I'm hoping that people will go check that book out on Amazon. How's it doing? That book's won an award or two? I'm trying to remember.
Oh, well, actually, it did win an award.
Ah,
It was got a first place award for self-help and inspiration. And I'm waiting to see if a few other tributes flow in or not, but we'll see what happens in the next couple of months. But that was good. And I just would add, Rob, that this isn't. I want to be clear. It's not a business book. It
mhm.
really is a book of inspiration and encouragement. But considering how people don't articulate doubt, we don't use the word enough. This is a book where you will feel seen and heard on every page, and there will be no shame spiraling when you're looking at this book. You will feel actually more at peace and more relieved to realize that what you're experiencing is normal and that you can move forward despite your doubts.
Right. And just to be clear, I've checked out your book, I wasn't looking. We're not looking for a business 101 for econ here.
Right, right.
That's exactly what I like about the book. And as an author, and I don't talk about my books on my show, but I have a book or so where I really didn't want to put dollar signs on the cover of the book. And I'm not here to make you more money. I'm here to just help you manage this thing called life. And if we do that, we're not only more successful in our business, more successful with our families and home as well. And that's what I like about your book. So I hope people will check it out. And if you do, just remember, it means a lot to authors. I got it. Don't worry. It means a lot to put a review on there. It really does. I think people get a little nervous. What do I say? How do I do? But one sentence, just say, wow, loved it. And make sure you love it. But put a review on there. It's you'll be doing a nice thing for not only this author, but all authors. Eddie, how do people get a hold of you?
Well, they can go to my author website, amywrites.live. And that is one. I'm also very Googleable, which I take pride in. Amy L. Bernstein, I should pop up in many ways.
You're Googleable? I
I'm
haven't heard that
Googleable.
phrase, but did you make that up?
I did not. Googled it.
Okay, Google it. Okay. Well, listen, great having you on the show. Love this topic, and I really don't see books about this, and it's a topic in which we hit a couple times that we've got to talk about. So, just grateful you had the time to come on the show, and it was really great catching up with you.
Thank you, Rob. I enjoyed it tremendously.
Well, we'll do it again as well as we can next time, everybody. Until then, stay safe.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's show, please rate and recommend it on iTunes, Outcast, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also get more information on this show and Rob at jollis.com.